So here's going to be a spoiler-free review of Venom: The Last Dance. I saw the film at a matinee this past Saturday. Now, collectively, these Venom films have been a real odd duck as far as superhero films go over the last 6 years. Just because the movies themselves are just so and yet somehow they're easily the best thing the whole Sony Villain vs. Marvel films have going for them. And no, I still haven't seen Madam Web yet. I thought the first Venom film was pretty mediocre in execution. It was superhero filmmaking straight out of 2005, and that's not really a good thing. Let There Be Carnage was actually an okay time for me. I think going for a more comedy angle worked in the film's favor. But both films are like an hour and 20 minutes each, which lets you know that, yeah, there really isn't a whole lot going on here. I would say the reasons the films have been successful is delivering a Venom that looks cool, and surprisingly fun interplay between Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote. It's not really how the dynamic works in the comics or any other the source of material that I've seen, but it does work for this movie version. But the trailers and the title, The Last Dance, promised one supposedly last ride for Eddie and his symbiote. In this film, following his brief multiverse shenanigans at the end of No Way Home, Eddie Brock returns to his universe but finds himself a wanted man by the authorities for the supposed murder of Detective Mulligan at the end of Let There Be Carnage, and he's also wanted by a, I guess, external multiverse threat named Null. Venom apparently holds some genetic codex thing that Null needs so he can take over the universe or something like that, so he sends some of his monster creatures to go fetch it. Ooh boy. The immediate issue to start off with here is how the plot really has no relevance to the end of No Way Home when it comes to Eddie wanting to go meet this supposed Spider-Man, or any relevance to his multiverse hopping. The plot involving this villain Null is fucking awful. I don't know anything about the character's backstory from the comics or source material. I can only go by what this movie showed me. But the movie really just briefly brushes through his backstory and narration for him at the beginning of the film. Because even the movie realized that, yeah, this guy doesn't got shit going on here. He makes Malekith from Thor the Dark World look like Thanos by comparison. And he's a villain that doesn't really do anything. Instead, he just sends his monster alien things to do his bidding. These monsters can only track Venom if he's in his full Venom form. The creatures are an okay threat, but there's obviously no character to them. Because of the setup here, Venom: The Last Dance is a man-on-the-run film, and it stays consistent to that all throughout. With the less than ideal story setup here, I realized that, okay, the only thing that's going to save this film is the interplay between Eddie and Venom, and it's still fun. As time goes on, they've built up some great chemistry, and oftentimes it is pretty funny. Let There Be Carnage was basically a romantic comedy for the two, and this film is basically a buddy road trip film throughout. Like I said earlier, this whole comedy dynamic between the two isn't really how the dynamic works in any of the source material that I've seen, but for the movie version, it's actually okay and does work. Not all of it is that funny though. There is some humor that they try to do with Venom that is pretty cringe, and the whole time I just thought, yeah, this really isn't as funny as you filmmakers probably think it is. But then they would make up for it with a fun action scene where Eddie, as just Eddie, and the symbiote are basically working together to take out their targets. And the Venom horse, that was a fun scene too. Your other characters in the film, well, there isn't really much to them. In fact, the film made me realize that it was actually sorely missing Michelle Williams as Anne Wynn, Eddie's ex-fiancée from the first two films. I guess the way the story played out here, there wouldn't have been much room for her, but given how she was the most important person in Eddie's life in the first two films, it's a pretty glaring admission not to even have a mention of her. All your other characters are at best. You have Chueji, whatever his name is, as a special ops general whose job it is to capture Eddie, and you can see where his story is going from the moment it starts. The weirdest casting though is Rhys Ifans as a homeless hippie dad that helps Eddie get to his next destination. The issue is that Rhys Ifans, he was the Lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man, and then he reprised the role in No Way Home. And we've already seen that all of this is connected in this whole Marvel multiverse universe kind of thing. So I really think Marvel has just got to chill when it comes to recycling actors now. And the same goes for Chueji Ejiofor, who was of course Mordo in the Doctor Strange films as well. I thought the payoff for the symbiote toxin teased at the end of Let There Be Carnage was pretty bad here. The scenes with all the scientists were pretty yawn-inducing. In fact, there's an extended sequence at the beginning that involves Juno Temple's character that was pretty damn awful. But despite this, for roughly about the first 2/3 of the movie, I was actually having an okay time. It was Tom Hardy and obviously Venom himself that were carrying things here. The action's pretty good. Like I said, throughout the film, they do a fun job of having Eddie play a role in the action and not just have a CGI Venom smashing things. And there were actually times where the movie got quieter and had some character moments that I was like, oh, this is actually working and is okay. But then the movie got to a scene where it completely betrayed its plot and sense of urgency. As I mentioned, these tracking monsters can only track Eddie if he's in full Venom form. And once Eddie and Venom realize this, they only go into Venom form when it's to save his life, obviously out of necessity. But then it got to a scene where not Eddie, but Venom betrays this for just the dumbest reasons. And you could just feel the movie lose the entire audience at that point, as you realized, well, if the characters don't give a shit, then why should I? Worst of all, this scene was just not funny. And it was another example of the movie thinking it was funnier than it actually was. But nah, it was just unbelievably f***ing stupid. To compound this stupidity and give you a double dose, right after this scene, the movie showed that apparently it's incredibly easy to break into Area 51. You can have a family of 5 and just sneak through an unwatched busted fence, and boom, you're in. The combination of these two scenes back to back left my jaw dropped, and I couldn't believe how bad these scenes were. At this point, I thought, oh man, there ain't no saving this movie. But amazingly enough, I did actually like the climax here. There's obviously no character to these monster creature things, but they do lead to some solid action. They do some good stuff with Venom fighting them, other characters and symbiotes get involved, and there were some decent character moments towards the end. And the way things came together here, it did live up to the title being The Last Dance, so it did add some meaning behind where the story ultimately goes here. And stories do feel better when there is a sense of real conclusion once it's reached. When the movie sunk as low as it did for those back-to-back craptastic scenes, I thought, oh, there's no escaping a hell no for this movie. But the climax somewhat won me over, along with some of the other stuff that I did like throughout the film. So ultimately, I thought the movie was a meh overall, which was my way of saying that collectively, it was an okay time. Not a great movie, definitely nothing I would recommend to anyone that isn't like a Venom fan or just into your basic Marvel movie. But if you watch it, it's not a terrible time or a horrible thing to watch. What did make me mad though was staying for those mid and post-credit scenes. I did so because Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage did have pretty important mid-credit scenes. But my goodness, get the f*** out of that auditorium as soon as the credits roll. It's two of the worst mid and post-credit scenes you will ever see. It's difficult to tell what the future is for Venom after this film, but I guess we'll just ultimately have to wait till the symbiote finds its way to Spider-Man, I guess. So that'll do it for this review of Venom: The Last Dance. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
We are Venom. We're gonna need to work on that.